First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm on the Swedish countryside. It's a lot of snow and my internet connection is not completely stable, but I hope this will work. I will talk about line of research that is rather new for us. So it's work under progress, although we have published a couple of papers. And before I start, I would like to say that although I think this technique or approach is promising, is of course not a guarantee for success. There is no guarantee success in terms of investigative interviewing. I decided to spend my a few minutes talking about a case more than the research actually. We mentioned a few things about our research at the end, but I would like to tell you about the case that inspired me to start this research in the first place. There was a very tragic case in Gothenburg more than 10 years ago now, where a young girl was attacked, she was raped, and she was left to die, and she died. And there was a suspect, a guy that was assessed as a sort of storyteller, that he had had several previous contacts with the police. And the assessment was that he would not confess if he's responsible for this. He will try to talk his way out. The investigators in this case, they had information about the suspect's activities before and after the party that Nancy was walking home from, and the suspect was also at this party. But they had a problem. They had no information that linked the suspect to the crime, which of course could have had the meaning that he was innocent. So the challenge was to see, is it possible to find any links between the suspect and the place and the time of the crime? And before I explain how the investigative team did it, I would like to say that they worked out a strategy that rested on what I call advanced perspective taking. This is what happened. They read that the suspect will bring, of course, not only one, but perhaps several counter-interrogation strategies to the interview room. And they predicted that he would be evasive, he would avoid and deny, and especially if he's guilty to the crime. The interviewer read this, of course, and they used what can be called suit tactics in the interview. And what I mean with suit tactics in this context is that they withheld the evidence, they asked questions about the evidence, but the questions didn't reveal the evidence. And then they disclosed the evidence. These tactics resulted in that the suspect had continuously to adjust his story. And you might think of this as where each evidence theme, as I call it, is a spiral. And you have an opening, and at the end of each spiral, the interviewer said, well, what you say does not match the information that we have. And these different evidence themes resulted in several spirals, one for each theme. What happened eventually was that the suspect learned his lesson, so to speak. So he read the interrogator's tactics, which would be in this case that, well, the interrogator always have more than he pretends. So the suspect therefore decided to change his counter-interrogation tactic. But this was exactly what the interviewer was hoping for. So the interviewer reads that the suspect reads his tactics. In fact, he wants the suspect to read his tactics. He was after that. So then later on in the interview, and this was a series of interviews, this didn't happen in the same interview. The interviewer pretended to continue to use the same tactic, to sort of repeat the same old tactic. But then the interviewer introduces the critical theme. And what happened was that the suspect, he anticipated that the same tactics are about to be used again, and he decided to sort of outsmart the interviewer. So he broke this spiral, and he tells what he believes the interviewer to already know. the point here is, of course, that the interviewer did not have this information from before, and the suspect told new and incriminating information that was used to convict him eventually. So I hope this was not too quick for you, but we have worked out an experimental paradigm that mirrors the structure what happened in, if we call it the Nancy case. And this paradigm is a little bit more complex, I would say, than the traditional paradigms in deception research. We need a rather complex mock crime with several phases, and the interviews are quite long, 25 to 30 minutes. And when I say long, then I compare against the sort of typical deception study. So we have done a series of studies showing that this, as we call it, the SoS approach, leads to more new critical information. The result is due to a shift in the suspect's counterrogation tactics from aversive to forthcoming. We have also seen in our recent research that the approach is sensitive to a number of factors, such as how these inconsistencies are framed and presented to the suspect. I should also say, this is not on the slide, we have now in a couple of studies show that we are able to sort of have this shift happen in about 30% of our suspects, which is a figure we hope to improve. So it's far from everyone that changes from aversive to forthcoming. So one could say, what is new with this approach? Well, I would say it's a couple of things. First, we elicit new critical information. And I guess everyone here knows that this is not a common finding in the work. We can elicit cues to deceit, but to elicit new critical information from suspects is quite rare. Another thing which makes this approach different is that the cues to deceit are not the sort of end goal, it's rather means to an end. So the cues to deceit are here used to make this shift happen. So, and finally, the approach draws, of course, on a shift in counter-interrogation tactics. To think about counter-interrogation tactics in respect to interviewing approach, it's not that rare, but I think this is one of the first approaches where, where we focus on this shift. There's a number of papers and there's no time to work this through, but if you're interested, you can have this short presentation and then you can see the work that we have published so far. There's more people than the three I thank here, which is Sarah Tekin, Timothy Luke, and Lina Nyström. There are others that have been involved also. So this was what I have in the Swedish Wolf for you as well. Thank you.